To help us unpack President Bongbong Marcos' Sona speech, we have Guido David of OCTA Research joining us today on Morning Matters. Magandang umaga sa iyo, Guido.
Hi, good morning, Gretchen, and good morning to viewers and listeners natin.
We talked about the issues he left out of that fourth Sona, but before we get to that, puntahan muna natin all the things that he discussed. This speech was done in 1 hour and 10 minutes, one of the shortest. And he started off by admitting that the dismal performance of his administration during the midterm elections was a referendum on his admin's performance in terms of basic services. What were your thoughts on that? What stood out to you in the fourth Sona in terms of both tone and content?
Well, I think it started off, something that would appeal to people from all sides of the aisle. What I mean is that critics and supporters alike would actually acknowledge that what the president said is true, that the midterms, which should have been a referendum on the administration's strength, actually showed some weakness on the part of the administration. And the president is a realist, and he realized that this is the case, and there's no sugarcoating, and that it should be confronted. And to understand why the administration is not, heavily favored in the midterms, he needs to go down to the roots and understand what went wrong, or what things are the administration doing wrong. And I think that's part of the result. So from this soul searching possibly of the president, so he gleamed that the people are unhappy about certain things, and one of those things is we hear a lot about Gretchen, about corruption. So that's why it started off I think appeasing and appealing, and I think the president quickly went to town to talk about these things, and try to talk about not just what went wrong, but what he has to do right, what the administration has to do that right in the next 3 years to regain some of that political capital that was lost in the midterms.
That was actually the final bombshell at the end of his speech, calling out corruption, particularly in the flood control projects, to which I was listening to a commentary last night. Sabi ni Shelo Magno, tinitingnan daw niya kung magkakaroon ng lakas ng loob ito si Presidente na pag-usapan ng corruption this time around, which was previously absent in his other State of the Nation addresses. But before we continue on, let's bring in somebody to help us also dissect the fourth Sona. We have Cleve Arguelles of WR Numero joining us. Magandang umaga sa iyo, Cleve. Ikaw naman, anong impression mo on the fourth Sona? What were the highlights for you in terms of tone and content?
Good morning, Gretchen, and to Dr. David. Thank you for having me today. I was listening to your conversations, and I think many of the things have been touched upon already. But I think one of the interesting aspects of this year's State of the Nation address, as Dr. David was also discussing, was that it's very realistic in terms of acknowledging the developments in the greater political landscape, right? That is, the entire landscape is politically fractured. There are competing political factions wishing to get public support, and the Marcos administration is just one among those factions. And therefore, I think what I have observed is that there is this tone of economic populism or hints of a social welfare agenda. And my reading is that this is in response to what the administration experienced in the 2025 midterm elections. So it's necessary, if the goal is to really consolidate or mobilize public support at this point, that it's a case among competing political factions, then its investments, then the administration's investments is on expanding social services. We've heard the president talk about initiatives in education, and rightfully so, but also in health. There's emphasis on zero balance billing in DOH hospitals, the increase in the discounts in the use of our trains in Metro Manila, for example. And yeah, I think understandably that the president wants to connect with ordinary Filipinos, and he wants them to feel that they're being taken care of by this administration, because as we've learned in the last elections, that wasn't really felt that much by our people.
Well, actually, yun nga, no, yung mga public services na yun that he mentioned took a very, very huge part in his Fort Sona. I actually thought that many of the services that he mentioned there were present for a long time, pero parang hindi napapansin, no, ng Pilipino, katulad na lamang yung zero balance billing na pag-uusapan na yun when you talk to DOH. Matagal na siyang ganun, pero marami pa rin hindi nakakaalam, which begs the question, for example, ang panimula ni Presidente ay actually tungkol sa ekonomiya, but unlike previous presidents, he did not harp on economic achievements, because if you take a look at inflation, it has gone down from 5.82 to 5.98 to 3.21 to now 1.8%. Pero sabi niya, inadmit kaagad niya na kung datos lamang yung pag-uusapan, magandang ekonomiya, bumaba yung inflation, dumami yung trabaho, pero lahat ito ay palumuti lamang, walang saysay kung ang kababayan natin ay hirap pa rin at nabibigatan sa kanilang buhay. Why do you think this is not making its mark? Is there something wrong here? Guido?
Yeah, I was surprised then. The president could have harped on some of the economic improvements, as you mentioned, Gretchen. So inflation is down. Unemployment is down slightly, based on my reading from the Philippine Statistics Authority. And, it's improving. Situation is improving. Prices have stabilized, obviously, because of the inflation. But instead of, thumping his chest on these, achievements, or rather these improvements, and of course we're still maybe top 2 or top 3 fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia. So these are not small things that the president could talk about, but I think he wanted to focus more on the populist aspect, because you could talk about, of course, inflation affects every one of us, but in terms of GDPs and forecasts, I mean, these are more macroeconomic in nature, and maybe doesn't really affect every person that much. So I think he focused more on what the interests of the layperson, the massa would be, and I think that was the focus of his Sona, so to speak. Parang do it for the massa. I think maybe with the reflection on the part of the president made him realize that maybe sometimes maybe we're out of touch with what the public really wants, and I think he's trying to refocus on that.
Kaya rin nag-Tagalog ng buong buo si Presidente. Oo.
Exactly.
Cleve, you were nodding your head. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I think if you put it in that context, the broader tone and the broader attempt or aim of the president's address, then you'd understand why it wasn't so triumphalist in terms of its statistical achievements in terms of macroeconomic indicators. And I really appreciated that tone. I really appreciated that it resisted the temptation of just talking about economic numbers, right? And rather focus really on what is being felt on the ground by a lot of Filipinos. Because, for example, in the last WR Numero survey, despite the slowdown in the increase in prices, and that's very important to note, right? There's the inflation rate is lower now, but that doesn't mean that prices have gone back to where it was. We're that so it's still a problem for many Filipinos, and so almost half are still saying that they're struggling to meet their basic needs on a daily basis, right? In our last survey, so I think that it hits the right tone that despite some of these achievements, the overall feeling of our fellow mga kababayan natin is that it's a struggle, right? To meet their daily needs. So rather than be triumphalist or even combative, no, I think that's the challenge for past presidents. Eh. Sometimes they get combative on their economic achievements, di ba? Kaya they're also punished by the people by a decline in popularity because they feel that what's being talked about in the Sona is not really reflective of what they're feeling on the ground. And this is a case of this is a change, right? And so if you put that into the context that the president delivered the Sona in Filipino, there was a lot of talk of what are the measures that's going to be taken by Malacanang to address itong mga pain points ng ating mga kababayan, then you see that there's really an overall attempt to connect with regular Filipinos, no. So that was the intention, and if you look at that way, no, very cohesive why the discussion on economic matters, no, was done that way.
And speaking of being combative, he has been combative about his 20 peso rice promise. Sabi niya, napatunayan na natin, nakain na natin ng 20 pesos sa bawat kilo ng bigas nang hindi malulugi ang ating mga magsasaka. So in short, sinabi niya, nag-work na, nagawa na, na-deliver na yung 20 pesos rice promise without, shortchanging the farmers on the palay gate prices, farm gate prices. Pero sabi rin niya, maglalagay siya ng 113 bilyong piso to make this a nationwide program. Your thoughts on that? I mean, you know all about numbers in terms of crunching it. Will this be heavily subsidized, and how long do you see this government sustaining that? Guido?
Yeah. About sustaining this program, I think they've done their studies, and I think it's possible. What I gather from the president's Sona speech, he stayed away from over promising, and in the past, a lot of what I heard was about foreign investments, and getting foreign international cooperation
Pledges.
I didn't hear much of I didn't hear much of that in yesterday's Sona. So I think yung reference to rice, yung bigas, the 20 pesos na na-achieve na, is mainly to show na, what the president says he will deliver. So he stayed away from over-promising. So the fact na, I think they're confident that they can do this. And I haven't crunched the actual numbers if this can be done. But I think they can allocate enough resources na they can cover this. I think they're confident in this. So we'll see if the president can deliver. Pero part of what he did not cover was the minimum wage hike, and maybe because he, like I said, he didn't want to overpromise on something that he was not sure that he could deliver. I mean, that's just my reaction to this. It's not scientific, so take it for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that he left out, which came out on both of your surveys, WR Numero and OCTA Research, itong issue ng impeachment. Which I felt like parang medyo na-confuse ako doon kasi in your surveys, for example, in OCTA, your poll back in July says that 80% of Filipinos want VP Sara to face her impeachment trial. It's the same with WR Numero, I believe. Do you think it was wise to stay out of that conversation given also the SC ruling? Or given this number, baliktad, sana nag-hardline siya doon, Cleve?
Yeah, I think this is an effort on the part of the president to be really to be disciplined in the message that it wants to send for its Sona. And again, the broader context is that even before the president delivered his address, there were already attempts for the Dutertes, for example, the Duterte identified groups to hijack kind of like the narrative on what the day is going to be about, right? Declaring that they wouldn't be attending, and they didn't attend. Some of them in the Senate, right? Walking out of some of the House leadership vote, for example, and talking about their current protest issues regarding the administration. The former president is an ICC, and of course the impeachment trial against the vice president. So I think that this is just a case of and I could imagine, I don't know who's advising him on political communication, but I could imagine them telling him that we just have to be on point and just really be disciplined on the message, because otherwise they will be raising these issues anyways, right? But as a but as a citizen as well, I'm still I think I share the disappointment of some that I was sitting there at the plenary hall, and I was waiting for the president to talk about these issues, and we didn't get any, especially when he started talking about the renewed efforts against corruption in government, for example, that it would have put teeth and really muscle as well on the anti-corruption efforts, because this is the biggest corruption issue at present, that's being faced by the country, right? The allegations against the Vice President Sara Duterte, but he chose not to talk about it. So I think it's, yeah, as I've said, it's discipline on the political communication side, but the other point as well is maybe this is also less confidence coming out of the midterms. There's less confidence to um, center this kind of like contentious and combative issues. You know, precisely also because that in just the dynamics of Philippine politics, you can't really attack opponents without without enjoying so much public support, and maybe they're very worried about that.
Well, in bringing up the corruption in DPWH projects, it felt like he was more, attacking his own allies and people beside him, right? Instead of the opponent on the other side of the fence. Pero what does your survey say, Guido? I mean, anong ibig sabihin itong 80% want the trial to proceed? They want VP Sara to face the impeachment trial. I mean, alongside conversations surrounding the budget and surrounding infrastructure projects like flood control.
Well, in our own survey, which was conducted July 12 to 17, among the 80% actually, and we allowed them the opportunity to, flesh out what their reasons are for wanting the impeachment to continue. And among those 80%, 59% said or answered that the vice president should address the charges to prove she is a worthy vice president and clear her name. So they're not entirely negative towards the impeachment, because the impeachment can be seen as just a process, just like any legal charge. If someone files a case against me, I will have to face that case, right? Whether I'm guilty or not. So, and then 21% said, I believe in the charges filed against her, and the vice president should address the charges. I mean, mostly or mainly saying that they think that these charges are, worthy. And then 16% said the vice president should address the charges so she can still run in the 2028 election. So it's mostly, again, not necessarily negative towards the impeachment. But going back to the other matters, about economics, one thing I noticed that was missing in the President Sona was about online gambling.
Yes.
So it was something that was not covered, as well as some international concerns. My friend and political analyst Ronald Llamas mentioned in our show last week that he predicted that the president will be talking about rejoining the ICC, but it was not also. It was not also part of the Sona, and I think, yeah, as Professor Cleve did allude to, that the president is staying away. I mean, he's tackling the issues that are confronted or confronting the everyday person, the massa. But he's staying away from being combative with the Duterte side. So everything, there was no mention of it. In fact, he was, like you said, Gretchen, mostly like almost like attacking his own base. Yeah. I mean, in the sense that he was addressing corruption, which and some people are saying that it's also coming from the same base. Not everyone of that, but of course, within that base. So those are very interesting things. Maybe the president acknowledges the popularity, or or that the vice president is still holding a significant base, and maybe not, or he's not going against that base, at least in that zona. So that's what I gathered from that.
Nag-iingat pa rin, no? Very measured and calculated
Very
response from the president. Taking a look at what he ended the speech with, yung DPWH, in terms of flood control projects, do you think he signaled a serious crackdown, or will this end up to be selective accountability? Because he said, sabi niya, he tasked the DPWH to submit a list of flood control projects over the last 3 years. 3 taon lamang. When, if you take a look at the 2 trillion, almost 2 trillion budget, simula pa, I think, noong 2009, matagal-tagal na itong budget na ito. At pag kinakausap namin si DPWH Secretary Manny Bonoan, sinasabi niya, I can only speak for what happened in the Marcos administration. At DPWH pa ang magsasubmit ng listahan. Siyempre, I mean, them auditing themselves, right? Your thoughts, Cleve?
If I would be if I would be generous to the administration, then of course it's a good thing, right, that they're about to embark on this. It's a much needed intervention, given that for the past budget cycles we have already been pointing out, many budget analysts have been pointing out that there's an unusual increase, in the allocation for flood control projects, and these are usually congressional insertions, no? So they are not part of the national expenditure program, no? And the president touched on this as well. Kaya nga when they were clapping, and this was like the one that got the members of the Congress to stand up and celebrate the president's achievements and the call against corruption. That was a very weird moment for me. Seeing that, given that, it should probably be addressed to them. This issue is present, and they're part of it. Largely being driven by those pork-like congressional insertions, right? So, but if I will be more critical, and especially looking at it politically, the steps identified by the president, that the list will be drawn by the DPWH, and then they will be reviewing the list, and that the list will be made public. It could also be a way for Malacanang to stay to stay politically relevant, and to ensure that they still have political control over the members of the Congress. So you could also read it in a way that it's a threat to the members Congress, that the next 3 years, this may be traditionally what we call the lame duck era of someone sitting in Malacanang, right? But I do have this list, and what you did in the past 3 years, and I could always make this public and ruin your political game in the coming years, right? So it may be a way to discipline members of the Congress to toe the line of the administration as well.
Isa pala na hindi nabanggit dito, no, sa usaping budget ay itong open bycam proposal. Kumbaga parang sinabi lang niya, threaten lang niya that for the 2026 national budget, I will return any proposed general appropriations bill that is not fully aligned with the national expenditure program. Tama nga kayo. Doon sila, doon sila tumayo at pumalakpak. Iniisip ko tuloy, pag sinabing reenacted budget, babalik ba tayo dun sa dati na maraming insertions? Kaya natuwa ano kaya yun? What would it take to see, for the president to show sincerity in terms of the promises that he made in this fourth State of the Nation address? Guido.
Yeah, I think if the president is as good as his word and his promises, and I think based on the Sona, it seems like he was being rather careful nga for most of it, because he was not over promising like we discussed earlier. I think transparency would be very important here, and people will just like to see results. I think that's the bottom line. If we don't see results from this, if we don't see anything na parang any expose or something like that, then it might appear that the president is not successful with his promise about about this budget. If the budget is aligned in such a way na it has all the essential items that the public needs, not just yung mga bloated infrastructure projects, mga flood control, but more of what the president promised, health driven, education driven, some investments in renewable energy, etc. Then it may be just a promise. So hopefully there will be results. I know 1 year is too soon to see results, but at least as far as the budget is concerned, if analysts see that there's something anomalous or weird about this next year's budget, then we might be back to the same thing last year na as you said, maraming insertions, and the public would quickly lose confidence in this administration, because I think the Sona is a win for the president, and he has to capitalize on this win, but he has to not let up in his efforts to drive the administration to winning the public back. And if he's not successful, it will not be a good 2028 for for whoever the administration anoints as its successor.
We will hold him accountable in 2026. But overall, do you think this was a good Sona? Did we see enough results, Cleve?
Enough results. I think it was very focused on plans and current challenges. No, I think another way to look at this Sona is that it's like the president was wishing that this was the first term of his presidency, and that it's back to tabula rasa, and we're just starting all over again. I think that's the wishful thinking, that's the attempt of this particular address. Was he able to talk about issues that are very important to everyday Filipinos today? I think he was able to do that, and by that alone, I think it's a good State of the Nation address. But were there also omissions and silences? Of course, right? The legislated wage hike, that demand from labor groups, for example, the issue on online gambling, those are things that we would also have wanted the president to talk about. But it was a very cohesive speech. I think if you're an ordinary Filipino listening to the president's address, you would have gotten the message that the administration is tackling these issues, and whether it will succeed, and make sure that that will be the legacy of that administration, or it will fail in the coming years, then it's for our kababayans to judge in the coming months and the coming years, right? I just think that I guess the last thing I want to say about this is that he did touch on a lot of issues, right? That's a wide range of issues, from education, health, agriculture, transportation. And these are sectors where we face, what we call wicked problems, right? They're not easy to solve. They're very difficult to unpack, right? I would have wanted to hear from the president structural or maybe long-term solutions to these problems. But most are immediate. Most are immediate, mga
Relief,
immediate
yes.
responses. And that will be good for Filipinos at home, across the country, right? Needing those immediate relief, right? But for the country, we also need to pay attention to those long-term changes.
Alam niyo kung saan ako na-excite? Gusto ko na masakyan ulit yung actually, hindi ko pa nasasakyan ever. Yung love bus. Oh,
That's a reference to our age.
Ginugal ko pa
As
kagabi.
the-
Sabi ko, ano ba yung love bus?
As a millennial, nagtatanong ako sa katabi ko, ano po ba yung love peace?
But to my age pala, I know what a love bus is. I wrote it when I was young. So,
Well, malalaman
There is-
natin kung effective yan. Okay naman.
there used to be a double-deck love bus around the streets of Metro Manila, like a double-decker. Like in the UK, yung mga double-deck bus. So,
Basta libre. Oh.
basta
Ano,
libre.
maganda yung itsura. We hope that the fourth Sona is not just a political balancing act, but we hope, of course, that it will signal true reform in the years to come. Maraming salamat sa inyo sa pagsama sa amin ngayong umaga. We have Guido David of OCTA Research and Cleve Arguelles of WR Numero giving their thoughts on the President's Fourth State of the Nation address.